Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have had a wonderful day so far. And for some of you, it won't have been a day. It will be just a few hours, minutes, or even seconds since you last saw me on transfer plans, given the congested fixture schedule within the Premier League, thus the tight turnaround schedule for myself on this YouTube channel. Today, I will have for you everything you need to know, but really there will be sections that are normally covered in this video, also located in solving your problems, given, again, the tight turnaround. Drop your questions in the comments, and if there's any sections that I've missed out here that you feel are particularly important, I will include it in solving your problems in combination with my team selection tomorrow. Wildcard 19 is already one that I have for you tomorrow. Now, this video is being filmed prior to me watching any of Ipswich Arsenal and Brighton Brentford, so it will be up just after that, and I'll be editing it in the meantime. As such, the rank is still the same as yesterday, and anything that you know from Arsenal, Ipswich, and Brighton Brentford, I won't whilst you're watching the video. So that's that. We are approaching 6,000 subscribers, and we're getting closer and closer and closer, and the growth this month has been absolutely magnificent. So if you could help us over the line, that would be greatly appreciated, especially if you are one of the regular viewers. But without anything else needing to be said, apart from the fact that if you enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like on it. Let's get into it. Captaincy has been an ever-present after the introduction in these Everything You Need to Know videos, aside from last week, but it is well and truly back in its arguably rightful place. I have two candidates for this week: Mohamed Salah away to West Ham and Cole Palmer away to Ipswich. Now, you can probably tell just from what's on the slide that I will again be going against Mohamed Salah in the form of Cole Palmer. There are three elements to this. One, the strategic element. Two, things which tie into the macro level side of things, which we'll come on to in the next slide, and then the footballing analysis. I would say that in comparison to previous times where I've gone against Mohamed Salah, the strategic element of this decision holds a greater weight than it has done in the past. And I say that because it's very difficult for me to argue against Salah, nor am I really trying to, given what he's displayed recently, and the individual level is of an absolute elite standard. So you will see my justification for going with Cole Palmer. Let's start with the strategic elements first, however. In times gone by, my main justification when it comes to this element has been, one, I have enough upside whereby it justifies the risk, and I think I do. And two, I also have the downside protection. I would say I have even more downside protection and even more upside to capture this time around, because I've got Salah's floor slightly lower than I usually do. And in general, his floor has been very high this season. And it's one of the reasons why I said it was very difficult to go against him last week, not just because of how good a prospect it was, but because of the floor attached to that as well. But this week, I see it as slightly lower for reasons I shall come on later. And that's the strategic element at a first glance. There is slightly more to add to that. Now let's go on to a few of my views on the macro level state of the game, and then we can go on to the football analysis. As it says in the first line on the slide, I feel as if the Premier League is quite unsettled right now, and allow me to explain exactly what I mean by that. Earlier in the season, I felt like I knew what I was going to get from Forest. For example, even from game weeks, maybe even one, I had a feeling of what Nuno Espirito Santo was going to put out to Anfield. Thus, my selection for sells, even though the fixtures kind of tailed off after the first three game weeks, I was more confident in it. However, since then, he's demonstrated a variety of things which I wasn't able to predict as he to a back three, the personnel selection away to Man United and Manchester City, and another game where he opts for more transitional threat than he had done at Anfield. And that's just one example. The second, for example, the adaptability that Eddie Howe's shown, for example, to move Bruno Guimaraes to 8, whereby he's been playing at 6 for a long time now, and a variety of other things in the Premier League where things just keep changing. For example, West Ham, they've now not lost for 4 on the bounce. They're only 5 points. They're only 6 points of 5th place, right? And considering they're a team who is getting talked about in the relegation battle, they're 6 points of 5th place. That's how congested the Premier League is, and that's how things are moving so quickly. For example, Brighton, they're flying. They're in the top 4. People are talking about them getting into the Champions League. All of a sudden, lose a few games, and where are they now? Maybe around 10th, okay? And that's what I'm saying. The Premier League this season has been so difficult to predict, especially in recent times, because things are just fluctuating. Now, compare that to the start of the season, you definitely saw patterns emerging. So, for example, Erling Haaland's captaincy haul was somewhat predictable. There were tactical trends, as I explained, with Nuno Espirito Santo, and there were just ever constants. For example, Eze's zonal occupation and what he was able to generate for himself. Okay, fine, the returns didn't come, but you kind of knew what you were getting game in and game out. Whereas now, I think it's far harder to predict accurately or even have a sense of what is to come. And there's just a lot more unknowns in play. And the reason I bring that up is because I think in this West Ham versus Liverpool game, there are also a variety of unknowns. And it's very difficult to predict exactly how things are going to play out, at least with a solid justification behind it. The reason that's important for me is I can now say to myself, okay, I don't fully understand where or what this variable is in terms of potential outcome, nor this one, nor this one. And I can almost use that as a basis to justify to myself that, okay, maybe Salah in this variable, because there's so many other things to consider within it, it's slightly difficult to say that he's definitely going to do really well or Liverpool are going to do really well. And I can use that somewhat of a justification to myself, at least. Maybe that logic isn't satisfiable for you, but it is for me, considering the volume of unknowns and considering that not all of them necessarily are now pointing to the fact that he might explode in this particular game, especially with how fast things are changing. You may think the analysis in the last slide is slightly wishy-washy, and I would say that's fair enough, but I don't want to come on here and be like, okay, fine, I'm captaining him. Well, I'm captaining Palmer for this, and this reason, and leave out some of the reasons as to why I do so. Now, do I share my entire decision-making process with you guys? Do I share every single thought I have on the game and players? No, absolutely not. But I felt like that bit of analysis, however, did not cross the line, and thereby it was appropriate for me to share. Moving on to more of the football analysis. And again, I reiterate, this is not just because of this. It's a combination of all the variables. And like I said, in this particular decision, compared to ones in the past, the strategic element certainly does hold more weight. West Ham have only lost once since game week 7, and that was their thrashing in the Arsenal game. And to be fair, whilst Arsenal took the foot off the gas in the second half and Gabriel got substituted, they were decent in the second half and they didn't really give Arsenal too much. It was mainly just their collapse in the first. They also have not lost in the last 4. What I would say about those last four performances is I don't necessarily think they were the better or deserving side in the game against Southampton. I think you could make a very strong argument that Southampton were the better side. I don't think they were a better side in the Brighton game. And considering the chances Brighton had at the end, I think they should have arguably taken 3 points. I don't think they were the better side in the Bournemouth game. And against Wolves, fair enough. I think, okay, 3 points is a fair-ish result, but it's not like they were miles better than them. However, in all of those 4 games, they found a way not to lose/win. And I think that's indicative of a side that is on an upward trend. To do that 4 games/3 games in a row, I think is quite impressive. And I personally, I've spoken about this in the past, don't really like betting against momentum when it's in this type of fashion. It's just not particularly my preference. Again, you may say that's wishy-washy, and that's fine. That's your opinion. I respect it, but for me, I certainly give it some weight. Now, against Liverpool, I'm also expecting them to approach the game in a different manner. They would have seen and experienced what's happened against Arsenal, and I also think they have the capabilities to set up deep, set up really compact, and then hurt Liverpool in transition. There are some sides, for example, which don't set up particularly deep or in a compact nature because maybe they don't have the capabilities to do so. That's not so much of a thing in the Premier League this year, but it has been in seasons gone by, hence why sides have opted for certain approaches. They just don't have the players/profiles required for them to be able to execute that as well as they would like. However, I think West Ham certainly do, especially with the centre-backs they have. I would say having a defensive midfielder who's more of the base eater type, who's a brilliant athlete and has huge dueling capacity, that would really help, but they don't have that. And whilst it's beneficial, I don't think it's absolutely necessary considering what they could do, right? So I don't think Liverpool are going to have the easiest game in terms of the dynamics. I think it'll be somewhat similar to Leicester, albeit I can see a better defensive performance from West Ham and for them to pose Liverpool more transitional threat. And when they're on the ball in general, be more of a threat. And probably for them to have a little bit more of it. So I think the volume of opportunities Salah's likely to accumulate goes down. I didn't touch on it too much initially. But again, I will say that I have an immense amount of respect for what Salah's doing. This is the best start in terms of the first half to an FPL season we've ever seen. The individual level is absolutely freakish. And I appreciate all of that. However, like I mentioned, again, it's not really got anything to do with him. It's more of a strategic play and the fact that I think West Ham are on a bit of an upward trend. They've got momentum with them, and I can see them making it slightly difficult for Liverpool, at least. I would also say, in terms of that particular Liverpool side, if you were to ask them what type of game they would want, I think they would want a game like Spurs. And I don't think West Ham will present them with those conditions at all. And without a certain type of 8/10, who I think both Jones and Szoboszlai are suited to more of the transitional type of games against a slightly deeper block, I could see maybe Liverpool having a few problems. The other thing is, and I speak about this here on the slide, in terms of how West Ham's ability to transition the threat they pose, specifically with Bowen Somerville, if he plays Kudus, I think that indirectly hurts Salah's claim, because if West Ham can get an early goal, then I think they'll look to make it really difficult for Liverpool to score and almost protect their lead, because they've got enough to be able to do that to some extent, at least. So yeah, that's basically why I'm not going for Mohamed Salah. Again, I haven't really spoken about him, and I haven't really spoken about Liverpool's attacking dynamics too much, because I can appreciate what is there. I know that they've got enough to score and score a few times, and I know what Salah can do. But like I said, there is the strategic element to this decision. Now, moving on to Palmer, I don't have too much to say, and I'm not really banking on too much, apart from the fact that, one, I've seen Ipswich lack a sense of compactness in terms of their block, and I think Palmer will therefore be able to find some space between the lines and just pick the ball up there. Considering we lost the last 2 games and Maresca's shown a very adaptable nature. For example, look at the Spurs. First half, he didn't like it. Okay, he makes a switch from Benny Badashili to right centre-back to left centre-back. Changed dynamic as well. You probably wouldn't expect Cucurella to have done what he did. And then he moves Enzo a little bit deeper as well, right? So I think considering the last 2 games have been far from optimal, personally, I think he might go back to a box midfield. Albeit he's had a preference for the diamond against deeper blocks, I think he might go back to the box midfield, and you can see Palmer at least operate on those on the right hand side a little bit more, which I think is certainly beneficial for him. Then again, the strategic element, and I've just got a bit of a gut feeling to captain Cole Palmer, and that certainly weighs into my decision as well. So that is my justification for captaining Cole Palmer. It's far more of a personal justification this time, as opposed to me telling you to do it. Not that I ever really do that, more encouraging you to do it. But yeah, that's where I'm at, and I wish you all the best regardless for you choose. For those of you who watched Transfer Plans yesterday, you would have seen me discuss how I think it might not be such a bad idea to allow the Palace assets to audition for me against Southampton, as opposed to hopping on them so early. I also expressed how I had not watched the Southampton West Ham game or a single second of it, nor the Bournemouth vs Palace game. However, prior to this video, I did catch up on both. I was impressed by Southampton, and I would say what I heard in the media and from the manager himself was correct, in the sense that they were the better side than West Ham, in my opinion. However, I also was quite impressed by Palace. People will say that Bournemouth pretty much dominated them for the last 40 minutes, and they had a variety of chances which they could have scored from, and they were certainly the best side in the second half, at least, and probably overall in the game. And to that, I do not disagree. However, when I speak about football on this channel, it's very much through the lens of FPL. You will never hear me, or very rarely hear me speak up about build-up structures. Why? Because largely it's irrelevant to FPL. Okay, fine. Against a certain type and a certain quality of high press, a poor build-up structure may lead to, or almost definitely does lead to, an increased likelihood in a high turnover, which means that if you have assets for those from the side which play centrally, they could profit in that sense, right? Okay, but that's a very unique situation. Usually, though, when I speak about football on this channel, I only really discuss things which are specifically related to FPL. Specifically related to FPL in that game was the fact that Palace's attacks in the first half were quite threatening, and they were very much focused around Eze, Sarr, Mateta, and Munoz to an extent. Now, a lot of you will be thinking about transferring in either Eze or Sarr or Mateta or Munoz, and I am here to say, apart from one of them, I quite like it. Now, which is the one I don't like? Eberechi Eze. Why? Well, it's very much the same story that I saw against Brighton, and it replicated itself in the Bournemouth game. And I've got an image to actually illustrate this in the next slide, but he pulls in that left half space deeper to pick up the ball, because he's got such brilliant progressive capabilities in terms of his passing, but also his carrying, and he's the one who really helps connect the play. Whereas Sarr is really much more of a runner. He's higher up the pitch. He's willing to exploit that space in behind, especially when it's on offer. And he has less of that type of responsibility. He plays closer to Mateta. And that happened numerous times throughout both the Brighton and Bournemouth game. Okay, even like in early stage build up. And that's the image I'm going to show you. It comes from a long ball, but initially Palace are building up, and Eze's pulled already before even maybe the centre back or like the 8 has received the ball. /6 because it's a pivot. Okay, and I think something we spoke about, which is so important earlier in the season, is zonal occupation. Right? And earlier Eze had that. But now I think Sarr certainly has it more inside. I would say as a result, he has more goal threat. And not only that, he's also cheaper. So for all of those reasons, personally, I've got Sarr. Now, Eze's a top quality player, and it's not like he's never getting into the right positions. He certainly found himself in right positions against Bournemouth. However, it's the frequency at which means I think he has to lean more on his quality, and as such, I prefer Sarr. I don't really want to have to lean on a player's quality each and every week for returns, as opposed to system and their zone of occupation. Eze is bad. It's just not as good as Sarr's. Obviously, you could have a Cunha, but Cunha is still a forward and still getting into better positions and still like their main talisman. Whereas with Eze, it's a bit more spread now compared to what you saw last season. The other thing with Sarr, and again, you may call it wishy-washy, but I like these type of things, is I feel like he's got a bit of a presence on the pitch and a sense of magnetism where the ball is almost drawn to him, and Palace really play into him, and I like that, right? I like the fact that he has this type of responsibility and status almost in the side. I would have Mateta as the second best forward in the game if I knew that he was going to play even 75 minutes each and every game, because the fixtures for a while are really, really good. And when he gets going, he really gets going. We've seen that last season, and I've seen glimpses this season where he's almost ready to explode and the goals will come. And I think Palace looks so much better. I think they look dangerous from an attacking standpoint. Okay, fine, they didn't have much in the second half, but the first half showed me enough. It reminds me of something that happened last year away to Bournemouth, where there were just glimpses of Son before he scored his hat-trick, and then he went on to do so. It really gave me that type of feel, mainly because it was away at Bournemouth again. The quality of the player, the fixtures, he's not too expensive. And as long as the expected minutes are good, I really do think Mateta could be an absolutely brilliant option. You have to interpret the expected minutes positively, but if you can do that, I think he's a great option. And I don't mind going early, I guess you could say, before you've already seen him hit his stride. This is the particular bit of play which I was referencing. You can see a circle around Eze and Sarr. Initially, the ball was on that left-hand side pretty deep, and they go long. But just look where Eze's stationed initially. He's dropping deeper to help connect the play, help the six, help the fullback when they're getting out. And then you can see Sarr almost in line with Mateta because he's more of the running type, and he's allowed to stay a little bit higher as well. And obviously, we spoke about earlier, this season, zone of occupation, why it's so important, and Sarr really embodies that more than Eze for me at the moment, and as such, he's my preference. It appears that some of you have certainly not had the rub of the green in this situation when it comes to your Saka replacement, as Bruno Fernandes got sent off for the second time in the Premier League this season and recorded a -2. Even compared to the guys who blanked, which is pretty much all of his replacements, right? Still about a 4-point swing, so a little bit harsh. Now, we can't rest on our laurels, however. It's happened. So who, for you guys who are in that position, should you be replacing him? You've obviously just heard my Sarr analysis, and he's arguably my favorite. I don't really have anything negative to say about him. Not really. I think there'll be a spread of output at Palace somewhat, considering you've got the wing-backs, Eze and Mateta. But considering the positioning, I think, and the price especially as well, you're getting a very good floor over a long period of time, which is what you want to really hold him for, considering how precious free transfers are coming. And not only that, but his fixed run has fantastic longevity as well. So I really like Sarr for all the reasons listed. And like it says there, you do not have to spend money for the sake of it. I know a guy who was in the top 1K and had 5 million in the bank because there were so many good cheap options. Okay, so that's optimal, but you don't need to spend the money. Luis Diaz, I'd say I'm fairly confident in a start, considering he didn't come on against Leicester. You imagine for a game like this, a tough game like this, he goes back to Gakpo, Diaz, Salah. It would make sense. Maybe Gakpo gets rested. Jota plays at 9 and Diaz spots on the left, given both of them are on the bench. But following Gakpo's goal and assist and his general form, could have had another goal as well, I personally would say that it's going to be Gakpo, Diaz, and Salah with Diaz at 9. You bought him. If he's going to start, you may as well give him 1 week. I know what I said about West Ham, but I think if you have him, you probably have more conviction in him and the fixture than I do. And thus, I would keep him. I know a lot of you probably aren't too happy with selecting Foden. For me, he should have hauled in the first half against Everton. He didn't, mainly resulting of his teammates. And even in the second half, I feel like the reason he didn't really get into the game was, again, because of his teammates. I imagine Pep switches things up, slightly different system, different personnel, all of which I think in his eyes will be an improvement, and therefore an improvement for Foden. Leicester away, West Ham at home. Mainly it's the Leicester away fixture I'm targeting, but if he can pick up some form, and considering he's at home to West Ham, I think there's upside to be had in the next 2 weeks. So, as you know, I was bullish before, and I'm still fairly bullish now. Obviously, a little bit less so because one of the fixtures is gone. That was a decent one in my opinion, but the best one is coming up. So, even if it's for immediate term upside, not even short term, I quite like it. It won't be, as I've said, that solid. And I don't think there's too many bad things to say about him. He's cheap, so he facilitates other things. The fixture run's good. His expected minutes are brilliant. And I think Marcus Silva really likes him. He's having a brilliant season. The output's been there. Even against Southampton, he could have returned, right? So it's not like he's just had this bad run in terms of performances. It's more just millimeters and a few little things. Maybe he has a little bit more luck and he has even more points than he does this season. So I think for people who want a solid option in the short term, well, it's not my preference because I always prefer a little bit more of a ceiling, a realistic ceiling, one which player is likely to capture. I think it's solid. Gordon, I only really have good things to say. Whilst Man United, from a tactical perspective, probably not the best fixture. After that, Spurs is pretty good, and you can't really trust United at the moment anyway. And Gordon is in very solid form. And I think the early sub is definitely indicative that he's going to start again, let alone his form, and that too on the left side. And that left side have really improved their dynamics, courtesy of Eddie Howe and the coaching staff. And in general, Newcastle are playing very well, up to 5th now, very deservedly so. So yeah, I only really have good things to say about him. You've seen in the past how consistent he can be, and yeah, there's just a lot of good things going for Anthony Gordon. Murphy's an interesting one because at 5 million, he's returning an amount of points which is absolutely brilliant, especially when you consider the price. But even without that, it's top. However, I do think he's going to constantly see these early subs around 60, and maybe with the congestion of fixtures, maybe even see a benching for Harvey Barnes in one game. Potentially, right? I think if that's going to happen, it's going to happen away at Spurs. And as such, when Morgan Rogers exists, I personally just prefer paying the 0.4 more. Know you're going to get stopped basically every game. The fixture swing is definitely here for Morgan Rogers as well. It gets a lot better now, and I prefer just going there, resulting in the expected minutes. However, if you think Murphy's can keep up this level of output with certainly a lot lower expected minutes, then by all means go there. But for me, he's not maybe as good of an attacker in terms of talent as Morgan Rogers. Thus, I prefer him, but only a little bit cheaper. And Ahmad's still in and around that category, and I think I prefer him as well over Murphy, albeit it's closer between them. And then a quick note on the rest. There are so many other options, right? You could go Madison, Sarr, Kulusevski, you could go Semenyo, and there's a variety of others which I haven't mentioned. There are a lot of good aspects to a lot of the assets. However, there's also a lot of bad aspects. So for me, I've just given you the ones which I think have less of the bad, not so much more of the good, because, for example, like Son, okay, fine, decent prospects in the next two at home, but I would say the floor's a lot lower. Whereas the ones listed here, I would say the floor's higher, and you can have a little bit more security around them. And I think that's really important, given how precious free transfers are, given we really want to be rolling as soon as possible on a consistent basis, and given the congestion of the fixture schedule with the expected minutes problem. Is this set to be Nicholas Jackson's last week in my side and potentially yours as well? Now, I was quite expectant of a benching in this period, and I spoke about that many a time, just having to be okay with that on the assumption the form was good, but it really hasn't been, and just playing João Pedro and Morgan Rogers together instead. However, considering it was a 70th minute substitution, so at least Nkunku got 20 minutes worth of a run out, more time to really show what he can do and essentially put in a performance which warrants a start as opposed to solely for the reason rotation. Considering that Jackson's ability to press off the ball is far better than Nkunku's, considering Nkunku came on and from that point we went from winning to losing, and I don't think he was completely innocent in that, and considering we're on a bit of a downswing, and in those times I really think it's best to just play your best team. Sometimes you need to freshen things up, but I think this is the position in which to do so. I would say it's more the structure, the midfield, and that area in particular. I think Jackson starts against Ipswich. Now, if he doesn't, like I said previously, there was always this element of rotation risk. However, I would say it's reduced, and given what I can see, I think it's fair for me to at least start him, and it's justified for me to do so. So I'll keep him this week because I think Ipswich away is one of the better picks. Now, maybe they go to Arsenal today and win 4-0, but like I said, compared to when you're watching this, the game wouldn't have been on for me, right? However, in terms of what I've seen in the past, they're there for the taking, and I would say at the moment it is the best fixture for me. Maybe you would even put Spurs in that category of fixtures to target. Everyone seems to be pretty much falling against them, or at least having some level of success. But I would have Ipswich down the bottom because I think Southampton have improved defensively, and Leicester up and down, they'd be pretty low down as well. Okay. But after that, okay, I'm not so sure I want to keep him. I don't like the Palace away fixture, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone told me now that we're going to lose. I wouldn't exactly be shocked, okay, because of the way things are currently looking and how good Palace are looking, right? I also don't think from a stylistic perspective it's a good matchup for Jackson. You saw how compact Palace were towards the end of that game, just in general. And Glasner's spoken about how they've improved in this fashion, and it certainly helped with the upturn in performance and results. Okay. But the main thing for me is I see now some similarities to what I saw last year. When he was going through his patch of not finishing well, the body language, the confidence that he was exuding, it wasn't there as much. And I think that's starting to creep in a little again. I don't think the threat that he's generating, whether that be through his runs, through his movement, through his demanding of the ball, is really there in comparison to what it was at the start of the season. I also think the restriction of Cole Palmer through the approach of other teams also doesn't help him, considering he's the real creative in the side who's been allowing Jackson in some fashion to put up the level of output he has done so earlier in the season, and then fixtures to some extent. Because whilst I don't really like Palace away, then it's like 3 home games in the next 4, and the one that's away is to Manchester City, and that's his type of fixture, right? He had a brilliant performance away at the Etihad last season as well. Okay, so he'll probably have some good memories of that ground. So it makes me given what I've said previously, I'm somewhat likely to sell. However, there are a lot of things to take into account. If I am to do so, after this week, what are the potential routes? I've obviously spoken about Mateta previously. Chris Wood's kind of just always there as a solid option. Johan Wissa, if I really fancy taking on difficult fixtures, albeit someone who I think is a good option, or Ollie Watkins. Now, I like it, and I think there's a lot of short-term upside. Obviously, I wouldn't have him for Brighton at home, but this video is not just about me and my team. It's also about you. Given Duran's got a red card, suspended for 3 games, Brighton at home, Leicester at home, FA Cup. I know they're appealing it. Personally, I don't think it's going to get overturned. Right, I'm fairly confident in saying it won't get overturned. I expect 290s for Watkins in the next 2, considering he's had a rest anyway, and there's no one else to really play that position. And I don't see less than 7 points in those 2 games combined. That's what I would say is his floor. Now, you'll say, I'm not paying 8.8 million for 7 points. And I'm not saying that's necessarily what you're doing. I would just have the floor at 7 because I think it's very unlikely he walks out of both games without a return. I think both are decent for him / good for him in different aspects. And as such, given the type of player he is, given that we've seen that Aston Villa have the quality to really hurt sides, and for example, in a game which is slightly more, well, they're offered the ability to hurt teams in transition a bit more, like City did and Brighton will do. I personally think Watkins could do quite well, and it's almost a fairly secure source of points with a high ceiling attached. The image you will see above me is one of Jordan Ayew celebrating after wiping out the Alisson, Trent, and Van Dijk clean sheet. Equally, I could have chosen Iliman Ndiaye after wiping out the Guardiola or Rico Lewis clean sheet, and maybe if I was from the future, I could put a picture up of Omari Hutchinson, Liam Delap, and Sam Schmolix and co. wiping out the Gabriel, Saliba, Timber, and Raya clean sheet. The point is that premium defenders this year have not represented the value they have done so in the past for a variety of reasons, and we've discussed this at length many a time. A quick recap: 1, the quality in the league is just better, especially the attacking quality in the league. And secondly, the shift in Premier League managers' philosophies means that teams are far more willing to attack. That is a combination for less clean sheets in the league, especially for the premium teams in comparison to seasons gone by. One of the things about being a premium defender is that you're expensive by definition, which means that accessing assets who we've spoken about, who you potentially may like Foden. I put Isak in brackets because I know a lot of you own him, but some of you are looking to get there. Watkins, Gordon, Mateta, well, they're not cheap, okay? So this is one way to potentially get the money out of a player so that you can afford these types of players. Now, we need to be able to justify why I don't think there may be so many clean sheets or why I think it's justifiable to sell these type of players. Firstly, there are many good cheap defenders, including Robinson, Anderson, Castagna to an extent. I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Sessegnon takes minutes off him if Fulham are to persist in a wing-back system. Munoz, another Palace defender like Chalobah, who's even cheaper, or Mitchell down the other flank if you wanted to double, and more like Hall, okay, who even as a rotation works quite nicely. So they could provide brilliant value for you. Liverpool, I think, have a hard run when it comes to trying to keep clean sheets. And I've spoken about this in the past, and it's why I kind of planned or suggested to plan for a route where you don't go for a Liverpool defender. You accept that there's a lot of upside attached to the Leicester at home fixture, but kind of just hope it goes your way, and it did, okay? But West Ham away, Man United at home isn't too much of a problem at the moment, but then Brentford away, Forest away, other way around maybe, it's very difficult, okay? There's also no Konate, and they look so much more susceptible, or not, maybe if not so much, they certainly look more susceptible on that right-hand side in transition without him. And in general, he does such a brilliant job in holding and protecting that entire space. He's so aggressive, brilliant level of physicality, and a top defender, right? Especially when Trent pushes on. Okay, so not having him is a big deal. And like I said, I don't think the fixtures are particularly brilliant either. Manchester City, I think you've got to give Vardy Leicester away fixture. That's the best of this fixture set, if not Ipswich away at the end of it. But after that, say he doesn't clean, you could probably let him go, especially if West Ham have a good game against Liverpool and show quite a bit of threat, especially in transition, where City are most likely to be hurt. And Arsenal, I personally don't love the fixtures from a defensive standpoint. I think they're pretty tough. I've expressed how I think Raya is a better option than Saliba or Timber for a variety of reasons at the moment, but specifically focusing on Timber and Saliba, one, I think Timber's attacking output might go down if, well, not if, because of Bukayo Saka's injury. That remains to be seen. Like I said, many of you will have some insight to that more than I will, because this game is being recorded before the Ipswich game. And Saliba's attacking threat goes down significantly with Gabriel in the side. And you're paying $6 million primarily for clean sheets and a lack of bonus, given the way it's structured and given how good Gabriel's been on it this season as well. And like I said, I personally don't think from a defensive standpoint, the fixtures are that great. So I'd be quite happy to rock with one, maximum two, and then shift the money elsewhere. And only two if you really have a lot of conviction and see a lot of upside to the move, like I did with Vardy. But who knows? Maybe I take him out quite soon for one of Nyoz or Danya or Chalaba. But you get the point. And that's essentially my argument and why for a long time now I've been pretty against premium defenders, or at least stacking premium defenders. Having Gabriel is great, but I think the rest of them, they're a bit off him. That is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. One, I certainly enjoyed, and I hope you did as well. If you did, please consider dropping a like on the video. And for those of you who are regular viewers who have not subscribed, for those of you who are new around here and wish to catch in on some of the luck analysis that has allowed the rank so far, and for all the brilliant ranks for the people in the comment section regularly, make sure to subscribe as well. I shall see you either later today or tomorrow for solving your problems combined with the team selection, where I'll certainly have a few decisions to make, unlike last week following the first day. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy the games tonight, and goodbye.